Between 1 million and 1.5.
Yes.
There were more homes sold in that price point
Yep.
than there were sold in the 900 price point.
There's just almost no urgency whatsoever, right? And so lots of buyers, but they're in no rush. It's a struggle to get them to go out and look at things. It's a struggle to get them to kind of put pen to paper. So, there really is just no urgency around anything.
In March, there were 190 price changes.
Yep.
April, 444 price changes.
Yeah.
And in May, 471.
Wow.
I told a lady the other day, I said, you're better off not to list.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And she had done all these maintenance upgrades. And I said, you're not going to get dollar for dollar. So are we back to normal, or is it a new market? July 1st is here. And it's been a hard 6 months for a lot of people.
It has. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. So when you think of 2026,
Yes.
what's the first thing that comes to your mind besides crazy?
Late is what I would say. So,
Yep.
with the activity that you would normally like to see in, the end of March, probably saw the beginning of May, right? And so,
I know.
Well, really, remain to be seen whether or not it continues into July, meaning we're late, or if it's just shorter season.
So usually my predictions are bang on.
Yes. Yeah.
I would say that I was wrong this year.
Yeah.
So when February came in, we had storm Mondays.
Yep. That's right.
I was
Oh my
okay with
gosh,
that.
That's right. Yeah.
So, really crappy weather throughout all of February.
Yep.
And then March came in. I think people just wanted to get away. Like, I'm done with Halifax weather. I want the sun. So you had 3 weeks of March break.
Yep.
First week of April was Good Friday.
Yep.
I thought for sure by mid-April the market would have picked up.
Yep.
And it didn't.
No. Great.
And I was looking at the stats this morning.
Yeah.
Showings this week were down about 800 from last week.
Yep.
And it could be prom or whatever.
Yeah.
What are the agents seeing in the office?
The comments that I'm hearing a lot is that there's just almost no urgency whatsoever, right? And so lots of buyers, but they're in no rush. It's a struggle to get them to go out and look at things. It's a struggle to get them to kind of put pen to paper. So, there really is just no urgency around anything.
It's almost like Goldilocks. It's got to be the perfect bed, right?
Yeah,
Perfect fit.
you got it. Exactly. That's a great way to describe it, as the Goldilocks kind of market, right? And everything's just a little too hot or a little too cold, and so nobody's really, committing to anything. And on the seller side, they also don't feel a ton of urgency, because we haven't seen people dropping prices dramatically, and our average price continues to remain about where it was 3 or 4 years ago, if not a little higher. You know what I mean? So it's quite striking.
I had a conversation with the seller this morning about reducing the price, and he said, "What do you think?" And I'm like, "No."
Yeah.
I said, "Is it you're going to reduce just to fall on deaf ears?"
Yeah.
So why bother?
Yeah.
And you know what I found out this morning? The $900,000 price bracket is purgatory.
Yeah.
Because if you look at between 800 to 899,
Yep.
there were more homes that were sold in that price bracket.
Yes.
And between 1 million and 1.5,
Yes.
there were more homes sold in that price point
Yep.
than there were sold in the 900 price point.
Is that right?
Yeah, which kind of, so whatever's happening in that band of the $900,000 home. So if you're a seller and you're sitting, it could be within that price point.
That price point, absolutely. It's funny. And I think we've seen pockets like that this year, where it's hard to explain why there's not activity in those, right? So
you wouldn't think that to be the activity if you can't get it.
Yeah.
Anyway, it didn't make any sense when I came to that realization today.
100%. Yeah.
So would you say we're a slow market, or would you say this is a bad market?
I would say it's between the two. When you look at the number of transactions that have happened this year, it's below each of the last 3 years, which I would have already described as slow. There's no point comparing to 21 or 22 at this point. Those were such anomalies. But even when you go back and compare to 19 and 18, we're still behind that in terms of number of transactions.
Just a couple hundred.
Just a couple hundred. A lot. Yeah, but that's, if you think of that as 400 ends, that's enough to impact some people. And ultimately, price point's higher, so that's good. for the agent population, I would say, because that's how we all get paid. But for the consumer out there, I heard an interesting take the other day on the Canadian market about how really it's just Toronto and Vancouver that have really seen price come off. A lot of these other markets,
their prices have been astronomical anyway.
Absolutely. But if you've kind of flipped that on its head and say, okay, well, Halifax price hasn't come down on average, but the price of everything else has gone up, and interest rates have doubled since when we got to 600,000. It's just affordability hasn't improved at all, right? And so that it'll be interesting to see whether or not sellers are interested in helping with affordability, or whether or not we're just going to be in a little bit of a slow period for the next little while.
Well, let's talk about stats.
Yeah,
right.
Love it.
So this year, there were 3,100 single-family homes that came to the market.
Yes.
But if we took all the homes that were on the market combined, right, because that's what I do, there have been 7,800 homes
to choose from.
Yep. And only, guess what percentage is selling?
Oof, I'm going to guess it's less than 50.
25.
Is that right? Yeah. That's wild. Yeah.
But interesting, you talk about price changes?
Yeah.
They are continuing to rise.
Yeah.
So in March, there were 190 price changes.
Yep.
April, 444 price changes.
Yeah.
And in May, 471.
Wow. Yeah.
So price changes are happening.
Yep.
And 60% of what's selling has reduced by $40,000 from when they were at the listing price to when it's sold.
Yeah. So if our average price is around 600, that's an average of an 8% drop, roughly 7 or 8% drop. That's significant. So.
Yeah. So I was, again, I've been doing the market differently since last July. It'll be a whole year now tracking it this way, where I looked at how many homes were actually on the market.
Absolutely.
Because I think that gives us a truer indication.
Totally. Yeah, it absolutely does.
And would you say, I think that the market, again, 2012, when you went to go sell because you purchased during Halifax ship start here, you either lost money or you're breaking even.
Yeah.
And I'm having conversations with sellers now, and I told a lady the other day, I said, you're better off not to list.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And she had done all these maintenance upgrades, and I said, you're not going to get dollar for dollar.
That's a problem. Yeah, that is a problem. If you've done the roof and the windows and the furnace and all the things that you should do, and you need to do to maintain a home, nobody's paying you back for those at this point, right? So
no, they're not.
Difficult. Yeah.
So do you think that a seller is fully understanding today's buyer pool?
I still don't. No, I still think that that's why we're seeing so much reluctance. Because if a seller understood what the buyers are out there actively looking for and how much leverage they now have in the conversation, if you really wanted to sell, you would be bringing price down to meet them, right? And I think that there is still opportunity. Like, I don't want to suggest that there's not still opportunity here in the market. If I were sitting in front of someone who said, is it worth me buying a home today? I would absolutely 100% say yes, like I always would, right? I think it is the greatest investment that you can make when it comes to building your wealth. But ultimately, I think that the sellers are not recognizing that buyers are nervous and the buyers are fishing for deals. And so you got to kind of meet them where they are. If you have a beautiful, ready-to-go home, then I think you've done your work to prepare the home, but you still have to think about a pricing strategy too.
And it's so important because it's not just about the house, it's about location. Like the same house, if it was in Spryfield, is not going to get the same amount of money that's in Bedford.
Absolutely.
Right?
Totally.
So
Totally.
location.
Yep.
So CMHC is forecasting Halifax to have some rapid growth, to move from rapid growth to more of a balanced pace. Would you say that's what you're seeing now inside of our brokerage?
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what I would say, is that we're definitely in a balanced kind of world right now. I would even say that there's some limitations on how fast the city can grow here in Halifax. I'd say that the limit on students, the limits on foreign buyers, the non-resident deed transfer, like those are all physically limiting the growth that we could see in Halifax. I know that there's defense spending coming, which is great, and similar to Ship Start here, although it's not one big blockbuster announcement, there will be jobs that get added and will attract people from other parts of the country. But there's some headwinds out there for sure for us in terms of growth.
You just spoke about the deed transfer tax, that being 10% plus the 1.5%.
That's it. Yeah.
And so I said to a seller today, because she wants to sell her condo in the downtown core, and it would be under 400,000, and it's ideal for the market for an Ontario parent to buy for their children as an investment. At least they're not spending money, on residents. And I'm like, we had a buyer from Newfoundland, and to get around the deed transfer tax, their lender was able to make the parents the guarantor of the mortgage.
Yep.
The kid went on 99% on title.
The deed,
And 1% went to the parents. And I'm like, I'm going to have to ask my broker that question. Can I put that in an overview? Like, how can I help a seller? Like, can you put something like that in an overview? Because I don't think every buyer agent would know that this is how you can, someone from out of town to buy a condo.
Yeah, I think, certainly there has to be the financial wherewithal of the guarantors and things like that
of course,
too. So it's going to be different for each. Like, it was interesting at our meeting a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about some of these programs that are in place to sort of stimulate housing as well.
But
so
they're not.
The opposite, they're not at all, right? The rebate on GST for new construction hasn't really been taken by anyone. The 2% down payment, the folks who do mortgages at our office that well, nobody's put through one of these applications yet, right? The down payment assistance program is still, getting some traction, but
although that price point is the most viable within our market, but are they not using it because the brokers aren't getting paid enough on it, or is it because the public doesn't know enough about it?
Probably the public doesn't know, but then when you get into the meat of the program, there are better options out there, right?
Of course.
And so I think that's the challenge. And as much as the the GST rebate on new construction is quite attractive, and you can put a headline out that says $50,000 off of your new construction home. I don't think that's compelling people to come into the market, right? It might cause them to look at new construction where they weren't previously, but it's certainly not spurring on new buyers who are saying, "Oh, well, I got to buy now because I get this opportunity for the next 3 or 4 years."
So with, I think I said there was, again, there's some homes that are still conditional. So with, there's been 1,955 homes sold year to date.
Yep.
And granted, in Halifax, since I started, I'll almost be 16 years, by the way, coming up. Since I started, we've only ever sold between 3,700 homes and maybe 4,500 homes.
Yep.
So let's say 2,000 homes. Do you think we're going to do another 2,000 sales?
Unlikely. We usually tick off sort of between 55 and 60% of the homes. That would include pending ones right now, but in the first 6 months of the year, right? The activity is now. So again, this is where I don't know if the word is late or short, right? Because if it's late and we carry on into July, and we're still bringing lots of listings onto the market these days. And,
the listings have increased.
And so that's good. I like seeing that because that means that there is still sort of activity going on in the market. And for buyers who are out there, I'm hoping their agents are saying, oh, yeah, even though it's July, there's still houses coming on the market. Let's continue to look, right? But if it ends up being short, meaning we only got a 2-month spring instead of a 3-month spring, then it's going to be hard to imagine we get to even the low end of that range.
Well, last year when I was looking at, so May was good, June was good, and then it dropped right down in July. Maybe 20 or 30 more in August. And by October, it had plummeted again. So probably the same cycle that we're going to see again this year.
If I'm a buyer and I'm a buyer's agent, the conversation I'd be having is, listen, there's still houses coming on the market. You're still actively interested in buying. This is the time to go start, pushing on some negotiation, right? Because presumably, to your point, there's 5,500 disappointed people right now who either came to market or were already on the market at the start of the year and have not sold their home. And so, amongst those 5,500 are some who need to move, right? And so kind of doing a little bit of an investigation around that. Yes, and it might not be, the ideal location, or the ideal home, or everything for your first purchase might be something that gets you started.
It's just to get started.
But go negotiate around this stuff, right? And you might find some that are pretty amenable to what it is you're looking to do.
Speaking of that, I had an interesting offer the other day.
Yeah.
And I actually submitted it for Jess because she's away, and this was a great pitch. So this particular property had been on the market since October.
Yes.
And they just did they just did a price drop, and we came in even lower than the price drop.
Yes.
So the offer went. We're going to leave the offer open for 2 weeks.
Yes.
Because if you go get another offer that's better than ours,
Yep.
we want you to have that offer.
Yeah.
But in the event you don't get nothing in the next 2 weeks, let's talk.
The last 6 or 7 years now,
Yep.
through COVID and after, and I really believe that we had kind of found a bit of a bottom when it came to the number of transactions.
Yeah.
But I really don't have a confidence to say that there won't be. There will be more transactions next year than there is this year. I'm trying to find the compelling reason, other than the defense spending that I think I do believe.
Everything. Well, that's good for the economy, right? That's good for people. Consumer confidence.
It'll bring some jobs into the region, that kind of thing. So that'll be helpful, and as that gets more and more press, that'll be good. But yeah, I'm really I'm not 100% confident that we won't see a few less transactions next year than we've seen this year. So
No.
Yeah.
If there was one thing that you thought the consumer was getting wrong in this market right now, what do you think it is?
I think when you have a bunch of hesitancy out there, it's when I would pounce, right? And I think that's what's missing, is that there are some people out there now, and you and I have friends and colleagues in Toronto and Vancouver who are saying, oh yeah, the condo market's like really beat up.
Yep.
Let's go buy. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
Let's rather than let's just wait and wait and wait and wait, and then when they start to go up again, that's when we'll start to buy. Well, now's the time, right? Because you've got people
I agree.
who are
I think there's a lot of
ready to
people
go.
especially in those markets, for sure.
Yeah. So I mean, the misconception is that, okay, well, let's say I buy a house right now. I'm a first-time home buyer. I buy a house for $450. Even if 2 years from now it's only worth $430. I've paid down some equity, and unless I have to move, I'm in a much better position than if I'd rented for 2 years, right? And so
At least you have something to show for it now.
You have something to show for it, and you know what? Housing will not, kind of flatten or even drop forever. Like this is the story in Toronto, is that average price has gone from 1.3 to 950, right? And so that's largely driven by the condo market.
Yep.
But even those people who bought at 1.1 on that way down will eventually get their value back in their home, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's opportunity out there that people are missing.
And it doesn't have to be perfect.
It does not have to be perfect.
Your first home, you're not going to have what your parents have.
That's right.
And because they didn't have that.
Yep.
I mean,
That's
I didn't
right.
have my house really till I was 50.
Yep.
And just get in and make equity, and then build on your dream home from that point.
I have you and I chatted about this a little bit, but my background way before real estate was in trading stocks, right? And so if I had not bought Apple at $16 a share because that was the very bottom, but I'd paid $20, I wouldn't be disappointed today. At after many splits, it's probably worth $1,000 a share compared to what it was then, right? So, people get into this short-term little tunnel of thinking, if I don't get this at the very bottom, it's a bad investment. Well, it's a great investment. Housing is a great investment. Your dwelling will eventually.
In our area.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And you're going to spend the next 25 years living and paying somewhere to live. So if you're paying yourself, including paying back the bank, it's going to be a better investment than renting for the rest of your your entire life, right? So
I agree with you.
It's a good decision. So so I think that's the part that gets missed. People are thinking about trading it like a stock, and you got to think of it as a long-term investment.
Agreed.
Yeah. There you go.